Hi, I'm Carol Alt, and today we are in lovely downtown New York City. Again, this was a very different time in modeling. So two things happened with runway. At the time that I was coming up as a high fashion model, which meant you were working for Vogue and Bazaar and shooting high fashion and beauty, and as well as the bread and butter, which was catalog. There came a moment when the agency called me and said, "You are overexposed." You would never hear those words today. There's no such thing as overexposure for a girl today. But in that time, they said, you're overexposed, and what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to work as long as you want to work if everybody sees you everywhere. They're going to get tired of you. So I said, well, what am I? They said, take some time off. I said, well, what am I going to do in the time off? I mean, this is my job, you know. I had no life other than modeling. I was 18 years old or 19 years old. They said, well, if you'd like, we can maybe call Calvin and Ralph and ask them if possibly you could do some runway work for them. I said, whatever, I just don't want to be sitting at home with nothing to do. And they said, all right, so they booked me for Ralph and Calvin. They paid me like $700 a show, and I did runway. Now, what's so unusual about that is that at that time in runway, what the girls who did the runway were basically what they called, not so flatteringly, the 7th Avenue workhorses. Each designer had a girl that was his muse. In that moment, what a muse was somebody who they fit the clothes on, and it was their fit model. And then they did shows in their showrooms, and they used girls that were, you know, just show models. But there were also some really amazing show models like Pat Cleveland, who were also high fashion. But it was never that somebody of my caliber went and did shows. And they sent you to learn to walk and the whole bit. I never did any of that. I walked the shows without ever taking a class. It was just, I just was looking for something to do. And it started to become the fashion. By 1983, I remember we did a little movie called Portfolio through Universal Films that has become a classic. Walking the runway, but that point was almost, you know, normal. But in 1979, 80, in the spring of 79, when I was waiting for this cover to come out, or in, I'm sorry, fall of 79 or spring of 80, very, very, very few high fashion models, certainly nobody of the caliber that I had already grown to. By 1980, I had already, I had my Lancôme contract. I was the model for Louis Theroux. I was already in American Vogue. I had this cover and another, 2 other covers, I think. Yes, I had Italian Cosmo and something else. The big pin in all of this was that I was in the fashion of the times. And in the fashion of the times, I had NR1, Louis Theroux, and 2 other ads, like one for that Albert Watson shot where there was a little motor scooter. But I mean, I had literally, and I was the cover of the Fashion of the Times, and I was in the fashion section of the Fashion of the Times, which is what prompted the agency to call me and say, you're overexposed. So that's why I was looking for something, basically something else to do. And then it grew from there, where the agency went, okay, you know, this is another way to keep the girls working if they're overexposed, so they started booking other girls to do that. And that's my version, at least, of what happened in that moment. The first time I sat down in some guy's chair to have my hair and makeup done, he said, so what are you going to do after this? I was like, what do you mean after this? I just started this. I haven't even been working a year yet. I mean, I remember that as if it was yesterday. And the next time I sat down in somebody's chair, they said, so what are you going to do after this? And then the next time I sat down and somebody said, what are you going to do after this? I started going, holy cow. My father said to me, this is over at 25 if you're lucky. You know, don't spend your money. You can only wear 1 pair of shoes at a time. You can only sleep in 1 bed at a time. You should not be spending your money frivolously. So yeah, I was worried about my career ending, and that this was a very short-lived career, and it basically expired very quickly. So I started to listen, and I started to ask questions. I'm like, well, what else is there at the end of this rainbow? They said, well, you could do commercials, you could do acting, and like, acting, you know. And then the agency at the same time had introduced me to, there was a girl named Davian Littlefield who was running a small office out of Elite that was attached to a movie agency. And I went in to meet her, and she started sending me out on commercial go-sees, and I started to take classes. And now I'm working 9 to 5 and 5:30 or 6 o'clock till 11:30 at night, and going at 6 o'clock in the morning to private coaches to learn how to talk on camera, to get rid of my Long Island accent, to you know, learn how to move, learn how to read copy. And then I'll never forget the first few appointments I went on for auditions for movies. I'll never forget one for Cocoon. Forget it. It was. I mean, not only did I not have the script, I had 2 scenes of a girl saying, I'm not like other girls, and had no reason in my mind that she would not be like other girls, because who knew she was an alien, because I didn't have the script. You know, that woman, I'll never forget it, Deborah Brown Casting, erased me, and then Davian called me up and said, well, you have to go and they want to put you on tape. You must have done really well. I said, I did really sucky. What are you kidding me? I didn't even know why she was, I mean, she's an alien, for heaven's sakes. How did I know that? I didn't have a script. She goes, no, but you must have done really well. She wants to put you on tape. I was like, Davian, she put me on tape. She erased it. So obviously somebody insisted on seeing me on tape. And you know, I'll never forget some of these early auditions, which probably ruined many opportunities later on, because people went, oh, well, holy cow, we read her, you know. But I started to study, and I started to work with all the best people of the time, and then I found some of my own. I mean, I worked with Warren Robertson, I worked with, oh my gosh, I could go through the list of people I worked with. In 1985, I was hired by Bob Fosse, and I have to say he was the best teacher ever. I watched him, we did Sweet Charity together. I watched him work with Debbie Allen and teach her, and she was a choreographer. But I watched him teach her how to dance all over again, and how to act. And, you know, I stayed day and night. He's like, you can go home, you're done. I'm like, can I stay and watch? You know, I just watched him work, and I realized how much I didn't know about acting. So I doubled my efforts. So whenever I wasn't working, I was in a class. And I listened to those people who said, what are you going to do after? My peers, when I started modeling, it was basically it was the changing of the guard when I started. Brooke Shields was working a lot. Christy Brinkley was just stopping to work. In fact, she was taking photos of boxers at Madison Square Garden, and she was, I think she had just married Billy Joel. So she was actually kind of stopping. Cindy Harrell had been cover girl, was no longer cover girl. Cheryl Tiegs had stopped like years before. So I was coming in when there was a new generation of girls coming in. Before I had started, Kim Alexis, Nancy Donahue, Esme were just, they were the big stars. They were already huge, huge stars when I started. I mean, Kim Alexis was on the cover of everything when I started. And then I came that year, and then the year after me came Paulina. So that was kind of my peer group. It was Kim Alexis, Kelly Emberg, Nancy Donahue, me, Paulina, Elle McPherson, that generation, the early 80s. The way we changed modeling was hugely through the help of John Casablancas, because already he was a maverick in the way that he set up his agency, the money he was charging for his girls. By the way, the money he was charging for his girls, now all the other agencies were wanting to charge the same amount because he was able to get it. All their stars were upset. But you have to understand another thing at this time. The girls that were working were basically working on a part-time basis, some of them. I mean, the elite group at Elite, so we had new faces, which were girls just starting out, model management, which was girls coming up, and then the elite group. And I remember coming into John one day and he said, oh, you know, how is it working with Irving Penn? I said, I will never work with Irving Penn again. And he said, why? What happened? Was he nasty to you? Was he rude? I said, not him. Not me, him. Him, me. He goes, what do you mean? What did you do? I said, I didn't do anything. I said, you did it. He said, what do you mean? I said, everybody in the agency called me about a trip to Paris. I spoke to everybody. 15 phone calls in a studio where you could hear a pin drop. Every time the phone rang, I was like, ugh, you know, because it wasn't cell phones. It would be the studio phone that rang. I was working with Vogue, with Penn, and that dang phone over and over. I was like, you already talked to me about this trip to Paris tonight. You already talked to me about this trip to Paris tonight. I said, John, I can't do this. I have to have one booker I work with, and that's it. And he said, you know what? You're right. There's a new breed of girl today that isn't working just 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week, if hopefully 4 days a week. He said, you girls are working 24/7. He said, I need to set up a new division that handles the girls that are working all the time. And he set up the super elite division, basically, which I think he put a booker named Dottie Franco in charge of the super elite division. And it was girls that were basically working every single day. And I was the first one in there because basically I was the first one who complained that there needed to be a change, and you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And some people argue that's where the term supermodel came from, because the girls in the super elite division were basically the supermodels. But, you know, we started looking at modeling as a career choice. It wasn't something that we did while we were studying for our real estate license. It was a career choice. I mean, I gave up going, you know, my scholarship to Hofstra University to study law, full paid scholarship, to do this. I wasn't doing this on a whim. I was doing this as a business. And as a business, I needed to treat it as a business and to perpetuate it as a business. And as a business, you need to grow and you need to change. And this was one of the first little growing pains, because it was very hard to leave the elite division with all the bookers that I had grown so fond of and who had worked with me and helped create my career, basically to go into a division where I just worked with one girl and spoke to one girl all day long, and you know, really didn't speak to anybody else anymore. But it had to happen because, you know, the way that the agency was set up at that time, there was a table with a center round, basically Lazy Susan. And on the Lazy Susan were these charts, and the charts had little pins on it. So for the girls that were traveling, they had green pins, and for girls that were booked that day, there was yellow pins. And so they could tell by looking at this, you know, it wasn't the computerized system that we have today. And they'd pull your chart out. So my chart had a green pin, I was traveling, and everybody pulled to make sure. Now, it wasn't done in a malicious way at all. They wanted to make sure I was taken care of. And it just happened to have caused a huge problem on the other end. And this was the only way I could think of to solve this problem. So that was another innovation that happened up at Elite, that we had basically a super elite division.